What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got another live fantasy football mock draft for you, this time on Fantasy Pros. And as you can see, we have got the setup all ready to go. This will be a 12-team standard mock where we have that fourth overall pick. Roster-wise, nothing too crazy. One quarterback, two RBs, two wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, and then 5 bench spots. No defenses, no kickers. We really want to focus in on those skill position players and fill out the majority of this roster. So let's kick this thing off. And before we get into it, a quick reminder for everyone interested, go ahead, check out the all-new updated website at alldaypigskin.com for some exclusive content, along with getting yourself a copy of the 2020 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. It's got everything that you could possibly want at a great value. Details in the description. But let's get back into this draft and look at what our choices are, because the first 3 picks have been made. They are McCaffrey, Barkley, and Michael Thomas. So I'm going to point out a couple things here. First and foremost, Michael Thomas in the top 3 in a standard draft. You're not going to see that. This is some of that built-in variability that Fantasy Pros has with their computer selections that you're going to see from time to time. It's going to have some reaches, it's going to have some drops in value, but it won't be anything that crazy to kind of prepare you for what might happen during your actual draft day. It's based on composite ADP, so keep that in mind when you see some of these selections. But what I'm going to do here, probably an easy choice, go with Ezekiel Elliott. But I will say, if the first 3 picks were McCaffrey, Barkley, and then Zeke, I'd be looking at Derrick Henry here. That would be my selection. I would not consider Michael Thomas because he loses a lot of value without that reception bonus. Same with Alvin Kamara. And then I give the slight edge to Henry over Dalvin Cook because of durability. But right now, since he's available, we're going to go best player, and that is Ezekiel Elliott. That's pretty easy here. Nothing to complain about. And we'll go ahead and look at the big board to see what has happened after this selection of ours in the first and the second round. Kind of break it down as we go. You see Dalvin Cook, you see Henry, then Alvin Kamara, Tyreek, Mixon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a first-round selection. Worth noting because this is actually our first snake draft following the Damian Williams news. We did do an auction draft where we saw a more accurate value of CEH, but basically this is the new norm. Expect to see CEH as a mid-first round selection. It makes sense. He's the guy in a great offense with Patrick Mahomes. So this is the new norm. Honestly, if you can get him in the second round, that's probably good value. Followed by run and wide receivers with Adams, Julio, and Hopkins. Then Nick Chubb, Miles Sanders. So Chubb, guys like Josh Jacobs, they have a little bit more value here in these standard drafts. And in fact, I'd probably have Jacobs ahead of Miles Sanders because Sanders does have that edge in pass catching, but we don't really worry about that as much here. You see Chris Godwin, you see Odell Beckham. Wow, a mid-second round selection. So this is one of those probably one-off picks. But for what it's worth, Odell's value will go up a little bit with the news on Jarvis Landry and the PUP list. And with Odell being 100% healthy, a lot of people, we said it before in our series of undervalued players, Odell was on that list, and his value should kind of return to not what it was before, but getting closer to that. Then you see Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, and let's look at our cheat sheet here, see who we have available to us. And we see a Kenyon Drake, we see an Austin Eckler. I love those guys, don't get me wrong, but they do lose value again in standard formats. So honestly, what I'm going to do here is maybe go a little bit off the usual game plan and go with the Travis Kelce. Let's see how we can go ahead and mess around with this roster after going tight end early, and if we can go ahead and come back from that type of selection. So as you can see, after our Travis Kelce pick, we can go ahead and break this down a little bit further. Mike Evans, I love him in standard and PPR formats. Amari Cooper, Kittle, Kenny Golladay, Patrick Mahomes, and then Kenyon Drake goes as well. So we've got a choice to make here. And again, I usually don't do this in terms of going these positions of tight end and quarterback early on, but I know that some people will do it. And they prioritize those number 1 guys on their team, those tier 1 guys, even if it's a quarterback and tight end, and there is a bunch of value afterwards. It's a deep position. So you know what? Let's kind of go ahead and try it out. Let's see what'll happen. It really wasn't the plan initially, but that's kind of how it unfolded. And I'm curious to see if we can go ahead and make our roster afterwards as good as possible still by going tight end and then a top-notch quarterback like a Lamar Jackson here. So it might backfire, and that's the worry when you go ahead and do this strategy, because then there's a huge fall off in running backs and wide receivers. Whereas if we had gone a running back like let's see who went after us, like a Chris Carson or an Austin Eckler, wow, falls all the way to the 4th round. That should not be happening. If we had done that, well, we wouldn't be as worried with the drop off in talent at the running back position. But after our Lamar pick, you see Allen Robinson, DJ Moore, Chris Carson, AJ Brown, Thielen, Juju Smith. AJ Brown would be a little bit higher on my list than in Allen Robinson than a DJ Moore in these standard formats. Mark Andrews, I don't like seeing Mark Andrews this early in the 3rd round. Usually you go 2.5 rounds after the top tier tight ends are off the board until you see another selection there. Then Keenan Allen, Mark Ingram, so a huge run on running backs here. Ingram, Connor, Eckler, David Johnson, Todd Gurley, Cortland Sutton, then Robert Woods, and then Jonathan Taylor. So going back to our big board and seeing what is available to us, we can go a couple of different ways. So we can go running back or wide receiver here. And running back, Melvin Gordon's a choice. I don't really like Le'Veon Bell in standard formats. David Montgomery, I really like. I'm going to go ahead and try and take the gamble that he's there for us in this next following round. So what I'm going to do here is I'm looking at 3 guys, Ridley, Cooper Kupp, and Tyler Lockett. And we need to address the wide receiver position. And I really like Ridley's upside in that Atlanta offense. He has high touchdown upside as well. So for that reason, he will be our first selection here. And then let's see how this running back situation works itself out. Raheem Mostert, Melvin Gordon was picked, Le'Veon Bell was picked, I was able to see. And so after Calvin Ridley, it was Mostert, Ertz, DJ Shark, Gordon, Stephon Diggs, Le'Veon Bell. So we still need to add a running back. We've got Zeke, so we afforded ourselves the ability to go ahead and maybe wait on this a little bit. But there's going to be a drop-off in this position, and then even more so on wide receiver when we get to the following round. But we've got a choice to make here, and we could either go our next best available running back into David Montgomery or a Cooper Kupp / Tyler Lockett. But I do believe there is more depth at wide receiver than running back. So this becomes an easy selection for me. I think Montgomery is going to have huge volume for that reason. He will be our pick here. So we fill out our running back slots with Zeke, with Montgomery. Then it'll be interesting what we can go ahead and do in this next round at wide receiver. And boy, oh boy, we got lucky, folks, because obviously you see those 2 names that are available to us. We'll break it down in a little bit. But after a Montgomery selection, Tyler Lockett, Cooper Kupp are those 2 names that we were considering. Then Dak, Metcalf, T.Y. Hilton, Marquise Brown, McLaurin. So Marquise Brown definitely has much more value in standard formats. He doesn't really excel in the high reception category. So for that reason, it makes sense that he's higher in these formats. Swift, Russell, Wilson, Cam Akers, some of those rookie running backs going, Waller, Murray, Evan Ingram, Devin Singletary, Cook, and then Deshaun Watson. So a run on some quarterbacks as well. But, usually we'd go ahead and, go quarterback, like I've said, later on. We don't have to worry about that now with our Lamar Jackson selection. At least that's in the back of our heads. Same with tight end. So we can go, again, best available player here. And it so happens to coincide with the wide receiver position. And I really like Devontae Parker. Obviously, with these last couple of days, all these wide receivers opting out in Miami, well, Parker gets even more value. So I'm going to go ahead and add him to our list. And then if we're lucky, AJ Green might fall to us. And that is exactly what happens. Wow, go figure. And we'll go ahead and add him for some depth. But again, looking at what has taken place up until now, Tyler Higbee, Sony Michel, Ronald Jones, both running backs that I would have actually very highly considered. Allen, Cooks, Matt Ryan. Again, some more quarterbacks taken off the board. Ryan is another one of these quarterbacks I always say in the later rounds. Great value. He's practically a lock for a top 5 finish with that offense. But we've got Lamar Jackson. We've got our own tier 1 quarterback, so no reason to worry there. And right now, we're going to go ahead and get our guy in AJ Green. He definitely has injury concerns, but he has tremendous upside. So let's go ahead and add him to our team. He could be our flex. We can go ahead and find some players afterwards if things get dicey at the wide receiver position. And it is our selection again. So this is going by pretty quickly, but that's what happens in these fantasy pros drafts when it's fairly automated. So after Green, you see Landry, Breeze, Mack, another running back that I would have liked to see come back to us, Daniel Jones, Howard, Matthew Stafford, Wentz, Tyler Boyd, Carry-On, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Keyshawn Vaughn, Geist, James White, Matt Breida, and then Marvin Jones. So we can continue to add wide receivers here. We can go ahead and see if there's some value at the running back position. Kareem Hunt's name is here on the board, but he loses a lot of value in non-PPR formats. So I'm going to go ahead and see what other names might be here. Kareem Hunt, J.K. Dobbins, Coleman, Lindsey. They're interesting names, but I think we can get much more value at the wide receiver position. And the name that sticks out to me right now is Julian Edelman. Obviously, he's a more PPR-suited wide receiver, but he's still a good value. He's still the #1 wide receiver for the Patriots. And if something happens to AJ Green, guess what? We've got Julian Edelman as a potential backup. So I really like the selection. And we continue to add to our bench. And as you can see, that was a good value pick the way it worked out for us here. Now, we've got 4 more picks to go. Let's again see the big board, see if there were any very big value picks since our selection of Edelman. Latavius Murray, Kareem Hunt finally goes off the board. Will Fuller, Zach Moss, Tevin Coleman, and then Emmanuel Sanders. So we can now consider maybe looking at a running back. The guy that I would be looking at here that I have the highest on my remaining group of guys would be Phillip Lindsey. And, I don't feel good about it, but we could have him as a stash. If something happens to Melvin Gordon, obviously his value skyrockets up. Now, I think, honestly, that entire backfield is one to avoid. But since we only have 2 running backs at the moment, we need to add some depth. And I think right now this is the best that we can do. And again, pointing this out because when you go quarterback and tight end early, you're going to suffer depth and you're going to have fall off at some of these important positions. And that's what you have to contend with and try and come back from. So again, looking at the draft board to see what has taken place, Dallas Goedert, Josh Kelly, Hayden Hurst, J.K. Dobbins, Hunter Henry, Darius Slayton, Boston Scott. So some backups starting to go off. Rob Gronkowski, A.J. Dillon, Madison, Duke Johnson, Tariq Cohen, Jamal Williams, Darrell Henderson, Tony Pollard, Adrian Peterson. I would have liked to select Tony Pollard as a handcuff to Ezekiel Elliott, but that's all right. We can go ahead and look elsewhere, at some other high upside players. It's not the end of the world. So let's again go to our cheat sheet and see what names we can consider here. So looking at this list, there's a couple names. Normally, I would say handcuff-wise a Chase Edmonds, but we don't have a Kenyon Drake. Looking at our wide receivers, I do like a Diontae Johnson, his upside on that offense for the Steelers. So I'm going to go ahead and take a chance on him here as that #2 potential wide receiver. So we've gone ahead, added him to our roster, and we've got the wide receiver depth. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide receivers at this point in time, even though we addressed it later on. And that's usually what happens. When you address that position later on, you go ahead and hit it hard afterwards. That's why we're going to have more wide receivers than running backs on this team. Let's see if we can go ahead and get a decent backup for quarterback. I think there's still some good value there. Tom Brady is the highest guy on my list left, so let's go ahead and add him for a decent value pick as a backup to Lamar Jackson. And then we have got one last pick to make. We'll see what we have available to us probably at that tight end position because I do think there will be some value there as well. And I'm looking at guys like a Jonnu Smith, TJ Hawkinson, Jarwin, Ebron, Jack Doyle. And I've said it before, I love Jack Doyle's upside. And I realize Trey Burton is also on that offense, but Jack Doyle is the more experienced guy, and I think he will be that number 2 option after a T.Y. Hilton. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up with him here. And just looking at our, we even get a draft grade A minus, 91 out of 100. That's nice to see. But let's go ahead and grade it for ourselves because I don't quite agree with this draft grade. So we went Lamar Jackson, we went Travis Kelce early on. And obviously, like we've mentioned up until this point, that's going to sacrifice depth. That's going to sacrifice some talent at some very important positions, running back and wide receiver. We were very lucky to get Ezekiel Elliott with that 4th overall pick. I think we were also pretty lucky to get David Montgomery as well. Calvin Ridley, Devontae Parker, I like how that worked out. They both have wide receiver 1 upside. Travis Kelce, obviously, that's a great selection. AJ Green, bit more of an upside selection. Edelman, there, I like the value. Diontae Johnson, I like the value. Phillip Lindsey, that's tough. Again, he's going to be really on and off. So for that reason, I really am a little bit afraid with our running back situation. And I always say that's the most important position in fantasy football. And right now, that is our weakest position by far. And that is a problem. So honestly, I would probably give this roster a B grade. Now, it's great that we got Lamar Jackson, Travis Kelce. I actually think we rebounded from that pretty well, all things considered. But again, consider that we probably got lucky from time to time with some of these ADPs, things like that. And it's not always going to be this successful when you go this strategy. And again, I want to point out that the running back situation leaves a bit to be desired. So for that reason, we can go ahead and use this as an example what might happen if you go quarterback and tight end back-to-back early in the 2nd and 3rd round. And then from there, you guys can go ahead and make your own decision in terms of whether it's something that makes sense for you guys to do or not. And let us hear it in the comment section. What did you guys think, along with any other fantasy questions as well? And another reminder, go ahead, check out the all-new updated website at alldaypicking.com. Get yourself a copy of the 2020 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide while you're there. Details in the description. But in the meantime, if you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in future videos.